In 1868, two brothers from Austria-Hungary made their way to Cincinnati, Ohio, where they observed the state of American bread and immediately recognized a lucrative business opportunity. Charles and Maximilian Fleischmann set out to revolutionize baking with a small, foil-wrapped cube that promised to make bread rise on command every single time. Their innovation was not just a commercial success, it made them wealthy and inadvertently overshadowed a time-honored method that families across Britain and Europe had relied upon for nearly a millennium. This method, which was cost-effective and rooted in everyday domestic life, produced lighter and sweeter loaves than the bread people typically consume today. Subscribe and comment for more ancient videos. The key detail that the Fleischmann brothers left out of their advertising was that this cube represented an ancient trick wearing a new label. They took something families had made at home for centuries, scaled it up in a factory, and sold it back to consumers at a profit. In doing so, they replaced the original method intentionally, driven by profit, and today few people remember that it ever existed. To understand the significance of this shift, we must journey back to the year 1200 in an English market town. Here, a baker works diligently before dawn, while a few doors down, another tradesman brews ale. What may appear to us as two distinct professions were in fact intertwined crafts, sharing a common ingredient: yeast. When brewing ale, a thick, pale foam rises to the surface of the vessel, alive with bubbles. Today, we refer to this as yeast. However, in medieval times, it was known as barm, derived from the Old English word borma. For much of English history, the terms barm and yeast were synonymous. There was no separate commercial product. The yeast simply came from the foam skimmed off fermenting beer. Bakers would skim this frothy barm from the top of their beer, wash it, and incorporate it directly into their dough. This practice was not only convenient, but also essential, as the active yeast contained in barm enabled bread to rise faster and lighter than any sourdough starter. The secret was that the leaven for the bread came directly from the beer. Interestingly, medieval English bakers had a name for this active foam. They referred to it as God's good. They lacked a scientific understanding of microorganisms and had no means to observe the living organisms at work. All they knew was that this strange substance could cause lifeless dough to rise and swell in the oven, akin to a small daily miracle. In gratitude, they named it in reverence and continued baking. The narrative that sourdough is the original method of bread making, while everything else is a modern shortcut, fails to capture the full picture. Sourdough is indeed ancient, but somewhere in the Middle Ages, particularly across Europe, barm began to supplant sourdough for everyday baking. It did so for compelling reasons. Barm proved to be more effective. A sourdough starter is acidic and slow, leading to lengthy fermentation times and imparting a tangy flavor to the bread. Conversely, barm provides a burst of fresh, vigorous yeast directly from the fermenting brew, resulting in rapid fermentation and a sweet, mild flavor. This method produced lighter, airier loaves that required minimal effort from the baker. Additionally, as brewing occurred frequently in many households, the leaven was always available. This partnership was not merely a convenience, it was a necessity. Many households had individuals who brewed ale and baked bread in tandem. The barm was always within reach, flowing seamlessly from the brewing process into the baking. The law even reflected this deep connection, as evidenced by the Assize of Bread and Ale enacted in 1267 under King Henry III. This statute fixed the price, weight, and quality of both bread and ale, as if it were obvious that one could not regulate one without the other. Some surviving recipes even call for ale to be incorporated directly into the dough alongside honey, effectively blending the two crafts into a singular culinary experience. The medieval mindset recognized that bread and beer were two sides of the same coin. As centuries passed, this relationship evolved and adapted to local customs. In Ireland, for example, there exists a traditional fruited loaf known as barmbrack, derived from the Irish term barine breek, translating to speckled loaf. This loaf is typically raised with barm and is often associated with Halloween fortune-telling traditions. In Lancashire, the soft round roll known as a barm cake retains its name, even though few ordering a bacon barm at lunch recognize they are requesting something named after beer foam. This cultural affinity for barm extended far beyond specific regions. The British palate developed a preference for the light, sweet loaves produced with barm, contrasting sharply with the French, who favored a more sour flavor profile. In fact, as late as 1670, France prohibited the use of barm in bread, defending the sharper taste of sour leaven against the newer yeast derived from ale. Despite the long-standing traditions surrounding barm, the ground began to shift during the 19th century. Scientific advancements were poised to explain the miracle of fermentation, and in doing so, they would unravel the intricate relationship between brewers and bakers. Around the mid-1800s, French chemist Louis Pasteur played a pivotal role in identifying what that frothy barm actually was. What bakers had revered as divine was, in fact, a colony of living single-celled organisms feeding on sugar and multiplying in the foam. This discovery held immense practical value, but it also set the stage for commercialization. Once yeast could be isolated and described scientifically, it could be standardized, manufactured, and sold. In 1883, a Danish researcher named Emil Christian Hansen, working in the laboratory of the Carlsberg Brewery in Copenhagen, isolated a single pure strain of yeast and developed a method to grow it independently. This clean, separate strain was predictable and controllable, marking a significant departure from the traditional barm that had been used for centuries. With Hansen's breakthrough, the historical method of using barm began to fade. The convenience of a pure yeast strain meant that bakers no longer needed to skim foam from brewing vessels. Instead, they could simply reach for a packet of compressed yeast, which was remarkably consistent and shelf-stable. As industrial bakers' yeast gained popularity, the age-old partnership between brewers and bakers began to dissolve. The once common practice of using barm was replaced with factory-produced yeast, leading to the decline of traditional methods. The beer-bread connection, which had fed families for centuries, was severed. The profound impact of this shift went largely unnoticed. With the rise of commercially available yeast, the art of bread making changed fundamentally. The lively, complex flavors that came from using barm were lost in the pursuit of uniformity and convenience. The relationship between the baker and the brewer faded into history, leaving behind only echoes of what once was. While the convenience of commercial yeast made baking easier, it also led to a disconnect from the natural processes that had governed baking for centuries. The art of traditional bread making, which involved an intimate understanding of fermentation, was replaced by a reliance on standardized products. In the decades that followed, the cultural significance of bread began to shift. No longer a communal activity shared between families and neighbors, bread making became a commercial enterprise dominated by large baking companies. The intimacy of home-baked bread gave way to mass-produced loaves that lacked the character and flavor of their handcrafted counterparts. As a result, many people lost touch with the origins of their food. The connection between the ingredients and the craftsmanship required to create bread became obscured. The modern consumer, seeking convenience, often overlooks the rich history and tradition behind the very foods they consume. Despite the decline of traditional methods, there has been a resurgence of interest in the art of bread making in recent years. Home bakers are rediscovering the joy of crafting their own loaves, often turning to sourdough and other artisanal methods. This revival represents a longing for authenticity and a desire to reconnect with age-old practices. Moreover, there is an increasing appreciation for the diversity of flavors and textures that can be achieved through the use of wild yeast and traditional leavening techniques. As people become more aware of the environmental impacts of industrial agriculture, there is a growing movement towards sustainable and ethical food practices. Understanding the science of yeast and fermentation is essential for anyone interested in baking. Yeast, a living organism, plays a crucial role in transforming dough into bread. It feeds on sugars, releasing carbon dioxide and alcohol in the process. This fermentation not only causes the dough to rise, but also contributes to the development of flavor and texture. Wild yeast, found in the environment, can impart unique characteristics to bread. Sourdough, for example, relies on a symbiotic relationship between wild yeast and bacteria to create a complex, tangy flavor profile. This complexity is often absent in bread made with commercial yeast, leading many bakers to seek out traditional methods. As we move forward, the future of baking lies in balancing tradition with innovation. While commercial yeast has its place, there is immense value in reviving ancient practices and understanding the role of natural fermentation. By embracing both old and new techniques, bakers can create a diverse range of breads that reflect their cultural heritage and personal preferences. The journey of Golden Seal and the story of yeast both serve as reminders of the importance of sustainability, heritage, and the intricate relationship we share with the foods we consume. By valuing these connections, we can ensure that traditional practices are not lost to time, but are instead celebrated and integrated into our modern lives. Education plays a pivotal role in conservation efforts. By teaching future generations about the ecological significance of plants like golden seal and the science behind fermentation, we can foster a sense of stewardship and responsibility toward our natural resources. Workshops, community programs, and school curricula that focus on the importance of native plants and traditional baking practices can empower individuals to take action. Moreover, engaging local communities in conservation efforts can lead to more effective and culturally relevant strategies. By involving those who have historically relied on these plants, we can ensure that conservation efforts are respectful of traditional practices while also meeting contemporary needs. Golden Seal is not alone in its journey. It is part of a global tapestry of herbal medicine that has been woven over centuries. Many cultures have their own golden seals, plants that have served as vital components of their medicinal practices. Understanding these relationships can enrich our appreciation for herbal medicine and the diverse cultures that have preserved this knowledge. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, there is a growing demand for herbal remedies. This trend presents both opportunities and challenges for conservation. On one hand, the interest in herbal medicine can lead to increased cultivation and sustainable practices. On the other, it can exacerbate the exploitation of wild populations if not managed carefully. Community actions can significantly influence the future of golden seal and other endangered plants. Local initiatives that promote sustainable harvesting, habitat restoration, and education can create a ripple effect, inspiring others to take part in conservation efforts. For example, community gardens that focus on native plants can serve as both an educational tool and a source of medicine. Involving local schools and organizations in these efforts can foster a sense of pride and ownership over the land and its resources, ultimately benefiting both the community and the environment. As we look to the future, the fate of Golden Seal rests in our hands. By making conscious choices about how we interact with the natural world, we can ensure that this important plant continues to thrive. Whether through responsible harvesting, cultivation, or education, every action counts. The story of Golden Seal is a reminder that our connection to nature is not just about what we take from it, but also about how we care for it. As we strive to balance our needs with the health of our ecosystems, let us remember the lessons learned from Golden Seal and work together to protect the rich heritage of our natural world. In conclusion, the journey of Golden Seal reflects a complex interplay of history, medicine, and environmental stewardship. Understanding its path from abundance to near extinction allows us to appreciate the intricacies of our relationship with nature and the importance of sustainable practices. By rediscovering the wisdom of our ancestors and incorporating it into modern practices, we can create a more sustainable future. Golden seal, with its rich history and medicinal properties, serves as a beacon of hope, reminding us of the treasures that nature offers and the responsibility we have to protect them. If this exploration has changed the way you perceive the wild plants in your woods, consider subscribing to this channel. Together, we can continue to uncover and share the invaluable knowledge that shapes our understanding of traditional practices and the healing power of nature. As you venture into your local forests or approach your kitchen counter, take the time to explore the ingredients around you. Recognize that the stories they carry are as important as the dishes they create. Each plant and each grain has a history worth preserving, and each loaf of bread baked with care carries the legacy of generations past. Let us honor these traditions by learning about them, practicing them, and passing them on to future generations. The journey of Golden Seal and the art of baking are just two chapters in the ongoing story of our connection to food and nature. Together, we can ensure that this story continues to unfold for years to come.